Jake sat in the corner of his favorite coffee shop, staring at his laptop screen like it might magically solve all his problems. The rain was coming down hard outside, making everything look gray and gloomy. Perfect weather for his mood, he thought. His coffee had gone cold an hour ago, but he kept taking sips anyway, more out of habit than anything else. The email inbox on his screen told the same story as always. Another rejection letter from a job he really wanted. Another company telling him they found someone more qualified. At 24, Jake felt like everyone else his age had figured out their life. While he was still stumbling around in the dark, he rubbed his tired eyes and looked around the busy coffee shop. College students hunched over textbooks, business, people talking loudly on their phones, couples sharing desserts and laughing at private jokes. Everyone seemed to have somewhere to be, something important to do. Everyone except him. That's when she walked in. The old woman moved slowly but with purpose, like she knew exactly where she was going. Her silver hair caught the light in a way that made Jake look twice. There was something different about her, though he couldn't put his finger on what. She wore a simple dark coat and carried an elegant purse, but her eyes held a depth that seemed almost ancient. Jake watched as she scanned the coffee shop, her gaze passing over empty tables and chairs. There were plenty of open spots, but she walked straight toward his table. He quickly looked back at his laptop, pretending to be busy with something important. "Excuse me, dear," she said, her voice warm but carrying an accent he couldn't place. "Would you mind if I sat here?" Everywhere else seemed so crowded. Jake glanced up, confused. Half the tables in the place were empty. But something about her kind smile made him nod and gesture to the chair across from him. "Of course. Please sit down." She settled into the chair with a satisfied sigh, setting her purse carefully on the table. Up close, Jake noticed her eyes were an unusual shade of blue, almost silver in certain light. She didn't order anything to drink, just sat quietly for a moment, watching him with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. "You're troubled," she said finally. It wasn't a question. Jake shifted in his seat. "I'm sorry, your aura," she said, matter-of-factly. "It's all twisted up with worry and doubt. You're at a crossroads, aren't you? Wondering which path to take." Jake almost laughed. Great, he thought. I've attracted the local fortune teller. But there was something about her tone that stopped him from making a joke. She spoke with the confidence of someone who simply knew things. "I guess you could say that," he admitted. "Just finished college, trying to figure out what comes next." "It's harder than I thought it would be." The woman nodded knowingly. The hardest part of any journey is taking the first step, especially when you don't know where you're going. She reached into her purse and pulled out something wrapped in silver paper. It was small, about the size of a cookie, but the wrapping seemed to shimmer and shift in the coffee shop's warm light. Jake found himself staring at it, mesmerized. "What is that?" he asked. "A gift," she said simply. "From my home, a place very far from here." Jake looked at the wrapped item, then back at her face. "I don't understand." The woman leaned forward slightly, her silver blue eyes meeting his. "You have something special inside you, Jake. Something that's been sleeping, waiting for the right moment to wake up." Jake's heart skipped a beat. "How do you know my name? I never told you my name." She smiled mysteriously. "Some things you just know. Call it intuition." She pushed the wrapped cookie toward him. "This will help you find what you're looking for, but only if you're ready to accept it." Jake stared at the strange package. Every logical part of his brain was screaming at him not to take food from a stranger. But something deeper, some instinct he didn't understand, was telling him this was important. Life-changing, important. "What kind of cookie is it?" he asked. "The kind that opens doors," she replied. "The kind that shows you who you really are." The rain continued to pound against the windows, creating a cocoon of sound around their table. Jake felt like the rest of the world had faded away, leaving just him and this mysterious woman with her impossible gift. "I don't even know your name," he said. "Eleanor," she said. "But you can call me Nana. Everyone does." Jake picked up the wrapped cookie. It was warm to the touch, which seemed impossible. The silver wrapping felt like no material he'd ever encountered, smooth as silk, but with a texture that seemed to shift under his fingers, This is crazy, he murmured. The best things in life usually are, Eleanor said with a gentle laugh. Trust me, Jake. Sometimes you have to take a leap of faith. Jake unwrapped the cookie slowly. Inside was something that definitely looked like a cookie, but unlike any he'd ever seen. It was golden brown but seemed to have swirls of silver running through it, patterns that moved and shifted when he wasn't looking directly at them. The smell was incredible, like honey and vanilla and something else he couldn't identify. Something that reminded him of starlight. Where did you say you got this? He asked. I didn't, Eleanor said with a knowing smile. But let's just say it's a family recipe. Very old, very special. Jake held the cookie up to the light. The silver swirls seemed to pulse gently, like a heartbeat. This was definitely the weirdest thing that had ever happened to him, but somehow it didn't feel wrong. It felt like destiny. What happens after I eat it? He asked. Eleanor's expression grew serious. You'll start to see things differently, feel things you've never felt before. The world will become bigger and more wonderful than you ever imagined, but it will also become more dangerous. Dangerous how? There are things in this universe that most people never know about, she said quietly. Powers and beings that exist beyond what your science can explain. Once you open that door, there's no closing it again. Jake looked at the cookie, then at Eleanor's ancient eyes. And if I don't eat it, then you go back to your ordinary life. Keep applying for jobs. Eventually find something that pays the bills. Live a normal, safe, predictable existence. There's nothing wrong with that choice. But even as she said it, Jake knew he couldn't make that choice. He'd been feeling lost and purposeless for months, like he was meant for something more, but couldn't figure out what. This strange woman with her impossible cookie might be crazy, but she was offering him exactly what he'd been searching for. A chance to discover who he really was. You said this was a family recipe, he said. Eleanor nodded. My granddaughter. We'll find you when the time is right. Tell her Nana sent you. She'll understand. Your granddaughter. Beautiful girl. Smart, strong, and with eyes that can see right through to your soul. I think you two will get along very well. Jake took a deep breath. He thought about all the rejection letters, all the nights lying awake wondering what he was supposed to do with his life. And he thought about the way Eleanor seemed to know things she shouldn't know, the way her cookie seemed to glow with its own inner light. What have I got to lose? He said and took a bite. The taste exploded across his tongue. It was like nothing he'd ever experienced, sweet and complex and somehow familiar, like a memory from a dream. The cookie seemed to dissolve in his mouth, but he could feel its warmth spreading through his entire body. His vision sharpened, colors becoming more vivid. The sounds of the coffee shop grew clearer, more distinct. Eleanor watched him with satisfaction. How do you feel? Different, Jake said, amazed. Like I've been asleep my whole life and just woke up. That's exactly what happened, she said, standing up and gathering her purse. The real Jake is just beginning to emerge. Wait, Jake said, jumping to his feet. You can't just leave. I have so many questions. Eleanor paused at the edge of his table. All your questions will be answered soon enough. My granddaughter will. Make sure of that. She leaned closer and whispered, Take care of yourself, Jake. You're about to discover that you're much more important than you ever imagined. Before he could respond, she was walking away, moving through the crowded coffee shop with surprising grace. Jake tried to follow, but by the time he reached the door, she had vanished into the rain-soaked street like she'd never been there at all. Jake stood in the doorway, rain misting his face, wondering if he'd just made the biggest mistake of his life or taken the first step toward his destiny. The cookie's warmth was still spreading through his body, and he could swear his vision was getting sharper by the minute. Whatever was happening to him, there was no going back now. Jake woke up the next morning feeling like he'd been hit by a truck. Not in a bad way, but like every cell in his body had been taken apart and put back together again. He sat up in bed, rubbing his eyes, and immediately noticed something was different. His bedroom looked crystal clear. Not just clear, but incredibly detailed. He could see individual dust particles floating in the morning sunlight. The texture of his old poster across the room was so sharp, He could make out every tiny printing dot. It was like someone had given him high-definition vision overnight. Jake stumbled to the bathroom and looked in the mirror. His reflection looked the same, but his eyes seemed brighter somehow, more alive. He splashed water on his face and tried to remember if the mysterious cookie had been real or just a weird dream. The warm feeling in his chest told him it had definitely been real. He got dressed and headed to his temporary job at TechFlow, a small software company downtown. Jake had been working there for 3 weeks, doing basic data entry and trying not to fall asleep at his desk. It paid the bills barely, but it wasn't exactly his dream career. The bus ride to work was an adventure in itself. Noticing things he'd never paid attention to before, he could read license plates on cars 3 blocks away. He could hear conversations from the back of the bus while sitting in the front. When an old man got on at the next stop, Jake somehow knew the guy was worried about his doctor's appointment that afternoon. How did he know that? The man hadn't said anything about a doctor at work. Jake sat down at his usual computer and opened up the spreadsheet he'd been working on for days. It was a complicated mess of sales data that had been giving him headaches. But today, as he looked at the numbers, patterns started jumping out at him. He could see connections and trends that had been completely invisible before. Within an hour, he'd not only finished the spreadsheet, but had also written a program that would automatically organize similar data in the future. His supervisor, Tom, walked by and stopped dead in his tracks. "Jake, what is this?" Tom asked, looking at the screen with wide eyes. "Morrison account data," Jake said, trying to sound casual. "I finished it and created a tool to help with future projects." Tom leaned closer to the monitor. "This is incredible. How did you do this so fast? And where did you learn to write code like this?" Jake honestly didn't know. The programming had just flowed out of him like he'd been doing it for years. "I guess I'm just having a good day," he said with a shrug. "A good day?" Tom laughed. "This is the kind of work our senior developers struggle with. I'm calling a meeting with the team leader. We need to talk about your position here." An hour later, Jake found himself sitting in a conference room with Tom and the department head Lisa. They were both looking at him like he'd grown a second head. "Jake," Lisa said, "your work today is exceptional, beyond exceptional. I'd like to offer you a promotion to junior developer, effective immediately. The pay increase would be substantial." Jake nodded, still trying to process what was happening. Yesterday, he'd been a struggling college graduate. Today, he was apparently some kind of programming genius. The rest of the day passed in a blur of congratulations and new responsibilities. Jake tackled every task they gave him with an ease that surprised everyone, including himself. It was like his brain had been upgraded overnight, but the really strange stuff started happening on the way home. Jake was walking to the bus stop when he got frustrated with a text message that wouldn't send. He shook his phone in annoyance, and suddenly, every streetlight on the block flickered. Not just once, but in a pattern that seemed to follow his movements. He stopped walking and looked around. No one else seemed to have noticed anything unusual. Jake took a deep breath and started walking again, keeping his emotions in check. The streetlights stayed normal. On the bus, a woman was talking loudly on her phone about her missing cat. Jake found himself getting upset on her behalf, wishing he could help. Suddenly, his phone started buzzing with a text from an unknown number. "Your cat is hiding under the blue house on Maple Street, 3rd house from the corner. He's scared but unharmed." Stared at the message in shock. How could someone know he was thinking about the woman's cat? He looked around the bus, but everyone was minding their own business. The woman was still on the phone, crying now. Jake wrestled with himself for a moment, then walked over to her. "Excuse me," he said quietly. "I know this sounds crazy, but I think your cat might be on Maple Street. Under a blue house, 3rd from the corner." The woman looked at him like he was insane. "How could you possibly know that? I'm not sure, but it's worth checking, right?" The woman got off at the next stop, muttering about weird strangers. Jake hoped he was right about the cat. He had no idea where that information had come from, but it had felt absolutely certain in his mind. That night, Jake couldn't sleep. He kept having the most incredible dreams. He saw cities that definitely weren't on Earth, with buildings that spiraled up into cloudy skies. He saw beings of pure light having conversations without words. He saw technology that made human computers look like stone tools, and through it all, he heard a voice calling his name. A woman's voice, getting closer and clearer each time. Jake woke up around 3 in the morning, sweating and confused. The dreams had felt more real than reality. Got up and walked to his kitchen for a glass of water, and that's when he noticed his houseplant, the small fern he'd been trying to keep. Alive for months, was now lush and green, bigger than it had been when he went to bed. Its leaves were practically glowing with health. Jake reached out to touch it, and he swore he could feel the plant's contentment. It was happy, thriving, like it was feeding off some kind of energy he was giving off. "This is impossible," he whispered to himself. But even as he said it, he knew it wasn't impossible. It was just the beginning. The next morning, Jake called his best friend Danny to tell him what was happening. Danny was a practical guy, studying to be a doctor, and Jake figured he'd either have a logical explanation or tell him to see a therapist. "Dude, you're freaking me out," Danny said over the phone. "Are you sure you're okay? Maybe you should get checked out?" People don't just suddenly become programming geniuses overnight. "I'm fine," Jake insisted. "Better than fine. I feel like I've been living in black and white my whole life and someone just turned on the color." "That's exactly what I'm worried about," Danny said. "Look, meet me for lunch today. I want to see this for myself." They met at a small restaurant downtown. Danny ordered a burger and spent the whole meal watching Jake like he was a science experiment. When Jake casually mentioned he could see the license plate of a car parked across the street, Danny made him prove it. Jake read off without squinting. Danny pulled out his phone and zoomed in on the car. His face went pale. "That's exactly right." "Jake, that car is at least 100 yards away." "I know. Cool, right? Cool." Danny leaned forward. "This is not cool. This is medically impossible. No human has vision that good." Jake was about to respond when his phone buzzed with another text from the unknown number. "The awakening has begun. Tonight, when the moon is highest, come to Riverside Park, East Bench. It's time we met." Jake stared at the message, his heart racing. See, he had to be Eleanor's granddaughter, the one she'd mentioned in the coffee shop. "Who's texting you?" Danny asked, noticing Jake's expression. Da, I think," Jake said slowly. "I'm about to get some answers." But as he said it, he wondered if he was ready for whatever those answers might be. The changes happening to him were amazing, but they were also terrifying. He was becoming something more than human. There was no going back. The woman named Z was about to enter his life. And Jake had a feeling that everything was about to change again. The real adventure was just beginning. Jake spent the entire day thinking about the mysterious text message. Who was Z? How did she get his number? And most importantly, what did she want with him? By the time evening arrived, his nerves were completely shot. He'd changed clothes 3 times, unable to decide what someone wears to meet a mysterious stranger in a park. Finally, he settled on jeans and a simple blue shirt. Figuring casual was probably the way to go. The sun was setting as Jake walked through Riverside Park. The place was mostly empty except for a few joggers and dog walkers. He found the East Bench easily enough, but no one was there waiting for him. Jake sat down and checked his phone. It was exactly on time. Maybe this was all a prank. Maybe Danny was right, and he was having some kind of breakdown. Maybe he should just go home and forget about mysterious cookies and impossible abilities. That's when he heard footsteps behind him. Jake turned around and felt his breath catch in his throat. Walking toward him was the most beautiful woman he'd ever seen. She looked about his age, with long dark hair that seemed to shimmer in the fading light. But it was her eyes that stopped him cold. They were the same unusual blue-silver color as Eleanor's, but younger, brighter. Like starlight captured in human form, she moved with a grace that seemed almost otherworldly, each step perfectly balanced and fluid. Even in the dim evening light, she seemed to glow softly, as if lit from within. "You must be Jake," she said, and her voice was like music. Warm, melodic, with that same strange accent he'd heard in Eleanor's speech. "Are you Z?" he managed to ask. She smiled, and Jake felt his heart skip a beat. "My name is Zara. Eleanor is my grandmother, though I suppose you know her as Nana." Jake nodded, still staring. "You're her granddaughter, the one she mentioned." "I am." Zara sat down beside him on the bench, and Jake caught a scent like jasmine and rain. "She told me she gave you one of her special cookies." I felt it the moment. Your abilities awakened. Felt it how? Zara turned to face him fully, and Jake noticed her eyes seemed to shift color slightly in the changing light. "We're connected now, Jake. Whether you understand it or not, eating that cookie created a bond between us." "I don't understand any of this. What's happening to me? Why can I suddenly see things from miles away? Why do streetlights flicker when I get upset?" Zara was quiet for a moment, studying his face. "What I'm about to tell you will sound impossible, but I need you to listen with an open mind. After the past few days, I'm ready to believe anything." "No. My grandmother and I aren't exactly human," Zara said gently. "We're part of a race called the Celestials. We've been living among humans for thousands of years, watching over your world, sometimes helping when we can." Jake blinked. "You're saying you're aliens? Not aliens in the way you might think? We're more like ... distant cousins?" "Long ago, our peoples were connected. Some of us chose to stay on Earth when the others returned to the stars." Jake looked at her beautiful face, searching for any sign that she was joking. But her expression was completely serious. "The cookie my grandmother gave you," Zara continued, "it doesn't work on everyone. Only on humans who carry ancient celestial blood in their veins, descendants of unions between our peoples from long ago." "So I'm part alien?" Jake asked, trying to process this information. "You're part celestial," Zara corrected. "The abilities you've been experiencing are your heritage awakening, enhanced senses, intuitive understanding, the ability to influence energy fields around you. These are all normal for our kind." Jake thought about his houseplant, the way it had thrived overnight, about the programming skills that had appeared from nowhere, about the dreams of otherworldly cities. "This is crazy," he said. "I know it's a lot to take in," Zara said softly. "But there's more you need to know. The awakening process makes you visible to other entities in the universe. Not all of them are friendly." "What do you mean?" "There are beings that hunt celestials. They're drawn to our energy, especially newly awakened ones like yourself. My job is to protect you during this vulnerable time and help you learn to control your abilities." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. "Hunt us? Why?" "Power. Our energy can be harvested and used by darker forces. Think of it like..." Zara paused, searching for the right comparison. "Like how a vampire feeds on blood, but these creatures feed on life force itself. And they're coming for me? Possibly. The stronger your abilities become, the more likely you are to attract attention. That's why you need training. You need to learn to shield your energy, to defend yourself." Jake stood up from the bench and started pacing. "This is insane. 3 days ago, I was just a regular guy looking for a job. Now you're telling me I'm part alien and being hunted by space vampires?" "I know it's overwhelming," Zara said, standing as well. "But Jake, you have to understand something else. The reason my grandmother chose you specifically, the reason she gave you that cookie." "What?" Zara looked directly into his eyes. "She believes we're meant to be together, that our energies are perfectly matched. In celestial culture, we call it soul bonding. It's extremely rare, even among our people." Jake felt the world spinning around him. Soul bonding. Dreams you've been having, the visions of other worlds. They're not just random. You're seeing places I've been, memories I carry. And I've been dreaming about you too, Jake. For months before we ever met. Jake stared at her, remembering the woman's voice he'd heard calling his name in his dreams. That was you. In the dreams. Calling my name. Yes. I've been searching for you without even knowing it. My grandmother finally told me about you yesterday after she sensed your awakening. As if to prove her point, Zara reached out and touched Jake's hand. The moment their skin made contact, Jake felt a surge of warmth and recognition, like he'd been waiting his whole life for this exact moment. Images flashed through his mind: Zara, as a child, laughing in a garden filled with flowers that glowed like stars. Zara studying ancient books in a library that seemed to stretch on forever. Zara standing on a balcony, looking up at alien constellations and thinking about someone she'd never met.
Ow.
Do you feel it? She asked softly. Jake nodded, not trusting. His voice, the connection between them was undeniable, like two pieces of a puzzle clicking into place. This is why my grandmother was so insistent about finding you, Zara said. Bonded pairs are incredibly powerful together. We can share abilities, strengthen each other, create defenses that neither of us could manage alone. But what does this mean for us? For me, it means you have a choice to make, Jake. You can try to go back to your old life, pretend none of this happened. The cookie's effects will fade over time if you don't embrace them, or ... or you can accept what you are. Let me train you, teach you to use your abilities. Learn to be part of something bigger than yourself. Jake looked at Zara's beautiful face, at the hope and uncertainty in her extraordinary eyes. He thought about his boring job, his tiny apartment, his complete lack of direction just a few days ago. Then he thought about the amazing changes he'd experienced, the sense of purpose that had been growing inside him. If I say yes, he said. What happens next? Next, I teach you to control your abilities before something dangerous finds you. And we figure out what role you're meant to play in protecting this world. Protecting the world. Zara's expression grew serious. There are threats coming to Earth, Jake. Cosmic forces that see your planet as a resource to be harvested. Awakened humans like you are Earth's best hope for defense. Jake felt the weight of destiny settling on his shoulders. A week ago, his biggest worry was paying rent on time. Now he was being asked to help save the world. But as he looked at Zara, felt the incredible connection between them, he realized he'd already made his choice. He'd made it the moment he decided to eat Eleanor's mysterious cookie. Okay, he said, teach me. Zara smiled, and Jake felt like the sun had just come out after a long, dark winter. First lesson starts now, she said. Close your eyes and let me show you how to see the world the way Celestials do. Jake closed his eyes, and his real education began. Jake woke up to the sound of his apartment door being kicked in. He shot up in bed, his heart pounding. Heavy footsteps were moving through his living room, and he could hear voices at least 3 different people talking in hushed, urgent tones. The digital clock on his nightstand read 3:17 a.m. Target is likely in the bedroom, a woman's voice said. Remember, we need him alive. The readings we've been getting from this location are off the charts. Jake's enhanced hearing picked up every word perfectly. These weren't random burglars. They were here specifically for him. He grabbed his phone and quickly typed a text to Zara. Help. People in my apartment. You know about me. Within seconds, his phone buzzed back. Stay calm. I'm coming. Try to get out if you can. Jake looked around his bedroom frantically. He was on the 3rd floor, so the window wasn't an option. The only way out was through the living room, where the intruders were waiting. The bedroom door suddenly burst open, and bright flashlight beams blinded him. 3 figures in dark clothing entered, moving with military precision. Jake Rodriguez, woman in front asked. She was tall, blonde, and carried herself like someone used to being in charge. We're with a government task force. We need you to come with us. Government task force for what? Jake asked, trying to keep his voice steady. For individuals exhibiting extraordinary abilities, she replied. We've been monitoring unusual energy readings from this location for the past week. We know what you are. Jake's mind raced. How long had they been watching him? I don't know what you're talking about. The woman smiled coldly. 3 days ago, you could barely keep a job. Yesterday, you solved programming problems that should have taken our best analysts weeks to figure out. Last night, every electronic device in a 6-block radius registered power fluctuations when you got upset about a parking ticket. Jake's heart sank. He'd been so focused on learning about his abilities that he hadn't thought about covering his tracks. Look, the woman continued, this can go easy or hard. You just want to run some tests, figure out how your abilities work. Think of it as serving your country. And if I refuse, that's not really an option. One of the men with her pulled out what looked like a strange gun, but instead of bullets, it hummed with electric energy. Jake realized they weren't taking any chances. My name is Agent Rivera, the woman said, and you're coming with us whether you cooperate or not. Before Jake could respond, all the lights in his apartment suddenly went out. Emergency lighting kicked in a second later, bathing everything in an eerie red glow. What was that? You? One of the agents asked. Not me, Rivera replied. But Jake could hear uncertainty in her voice. That's when Zara appeared. She didn't walk through the door or climb through the window. One moment the doorway was empty, the next moment she was standing there, glowing softly. In the red light, her eyes had turned completely silver, and she moved with a fluid grace that seemed to defy physics. Step away from him, she said. And her voice carried a power that made the whole room vibrate. Rivera spun around, raising her weapon. Another one. How many of you are there? More than you can handle, Zara replied calmly. Jake watched in amazement. As Zara raised her hand, Agent's weapon simply dissolved, turning to harmless dust that scattered on the floor. The other two agents tried to draw their weapons, but found their hands frozen in place, unable to move. Jake, Zara said, without taking her eyes off the agents, we need to leave. Now, you can't just disappear, Rivera said, though Jake could hear fear creeping into her voice. We know about your kind. We know about the others like you. If you run, we'll find you again. Others like us? Zara asked, her expression darkening. What others? Rivera seemed to realize she'd said too much. We've been tracking unusual individuals for years. You're not the first ones we've found. Jake felt sick. What did you do to them? He studied. Them learned from them. Some even chose to work with us voluntarily. And the ones who didn't choose? Zara demanded. Rivera's silence was answer enough. Zara's glow intensified. And Jake felt the temperature in the room drop several degrees. You made a mistake coming here tonight. She gestured toward the window, and it simply vanished, not broken, but gone, as if it had never existed. Cool night air rushed into the apartment. Can you trust me? Zara asked Jake. Jake looked at the agents, still frozen in place by Zara's power, and at the impossible window that had been there moments before. Do I have a choice? There's always a choice. But if you come with me, there's no going back to your old life. Jake thought about his boring job, his tiny apartment, his complete lack of purpose just a week ago. Then he thought about the amazing woman standing before him, offering him a chance to be part of something incredible. Let's go, he said. Zara smiled and took his hand. Hold tight. Next thing Jake knew, they were flying. Not in a plane or helicopter, but actually flying through the air, held up by some invisible force that surrounded them both. The city spread out below them like a carpet of lights, beautiful and surreal. How are we doing this? Jake shouted over the wind. Celestial transportation, Zara called back. One of many abilities you'll learn. They landed on the roof of a building several miles away. Jake's legs were shaky, but he felt exhilarated. Flying was the most incredible thing he'd ever experienced. Are you okay? Zara asked, studying his face with concern. That was amazing, Jake said. But those agents, they knew about others like us? Are there more people like me? Zara's expression grew serious. Yes, but most of them have been taken by the government, or worse. The organization Agent Rivera works for has been hunting our kind for decades. What do they want? Power, control. They want to understand our abilities so they can replicate them, weaponize them, and if they can't control us... Zara trailed. Off. They eliminate us, Jake finished. Some of them, yes, but there's something else, Jake. Something much worse than government agents. As if summoned by her words, The air around them suddenly grew cold. Very cold. Jake could see his breath, and frost began forming on the rooftop despite the warm spring night. "They're here," Zara whispered, fear creeping into her voice for the first time since he'd met her. "Who's here?" Dark shapes began materializing out of the shadows around the rooftop. They looked almost human, but wrong somehow. Too tall, too thin, with movements that seemed to bend reality around them. Their eyes glowed with a hungry red light. "Shadow hunters," Zara said. "They feed on celestial energy. The government investigation must have created enough disturbance to attract them." One of the creatures spoke, its voice like breaking glass. "New awakening, fresh power. We hunger." Jake felt terror unlike anything he'd ever experienced. These things weren't human, weren't even close to human. They were predators, and he was prey. "Stay behind me," Zara said, her entire body beginning to glow with silver light. "And whatever happens, don't let them touch you." The creatures began moving closer, circling them like wolves surrounding wounded deer. Jake could feel their hunger, their desire to drain every drop of energy from his body. "Can we fight them?" Jake asked. "We can try," Zara replied. "But Jake, I need you to trust me completely. Our bond is the only thing that might save us." "What do I do?" "Focus on me." "Well, the connection between us. Let our energies combine." Jake reached out and took Zara's hand, and immediately felt their power flow together like two rivers joining into one mighty current. The silver light around Zara spread to encompass him as well, and suddenly he could feel her strength, her knowledge, her determination. "Together," she said. "Together," Jake agreed. The shadow hunters attacked as one, moving faster than anything Jake had ever seen. But together, he and Zara were ready for them. The real fight of Jake's life was about to begin. The shadow hunters moved like lightning, but Jake and Zara were ready. The moment their hands touched, Jake felt Zara's power flowing through him like liquid starlight. His vision sharpened beyond anything he'd experienced before. He could see the creatures' movements before they made them, sensed their intentions like reading an open book. The first hunter lunged at them with claws that seemed to tear through reality itself. Zara raised her free hand, and a wall of silver light erupted between them and their attacker. The creature hit the barrier and screamed, a sound like metal being torn apart. "I can feel what you're thinking," Jake said in amazement. "Is that possible soul bond?" Zara replied, not taking her eyes off the circling hunters. "When celestials truly connect, we become two parts of the same whole." Another hunter tried to attack from behind, but Jake instinctively spun around and thrust out his hand. Pure energy shot from his palm, sending the creature flying backwards off the rooftop. He stared at his hand in shock. "I don't know how I did that." "You're learning faster than anyone I've ever seen," Zara said with pride. "Your human adaptability combined with celestial power is incredible." The remaining hunters regrouped, and Jake could see intelligence in their glowing red eyes. They were learning too, figuring out how to counter the couple's defenses. "There are too many of them," Zara said.
Oh, wait.
Wait a while.
We saw a guy
Before Jake could ask where, the air above them shimmered like heat waves. Suddenly Eleanor appeared, floating down from the sky like an angel. But this wasn't the sweet old woman from the coffee shop. This was Eleanor in her true form, radiating power that made the hunters step back in fear. "Grandmother Zara," said with relief. Having trouble. Dear? Eleanor asked calmly, as if interdimensional monsters attacked her every day. She gestured casually at the nearest hunter, and it simply vanished into smoke. How did you find us? Jake asked. I've been keeping an eye on you both, Eleanor replied. Good thing, too. These creatures are just scouts. The real danger is still coming. She waved her hand, and a portal of swirling silver light opened in the air behind them. Come, there's someone you both need to meet. They stepped through the portal and found themselves in what could only be described as a space station. Through massive windows, Jake could see Earth hanging in the void like a blue marble. The technology around them was beyond anything he'd ever imagined, all flowing curves and crystalline surfaces that pulsed with gentle light. Welcome to Haven Station, Eleanor said, one of our last remaining outposts. Other people moved through the corridors, all with the same otherworldly grace. As Zara and Eleanor, some looked human, others had subtle differences, skin that shimmered, eyes that held too much knowledge, hair that moved like it was underwater. These are the Celestials, Jake asked. Some of us, Eleanor nodded. Others are scattered across the galaxy, working to protect worlds like Earth from what's coming. They entered a vast chamber where a council of elderly Celestials sat around a table made of what looked like crystallized starlight. At the head of the table sat a man who radiated authority and wisdom. This is Jake, Eleanor announced. The one I told you about? The man studied Jake with eyes that seemed to see right through to his soul. So young, he said finally. And yet the prophecies spoke truly. You carry the spark of both worlds within you. Prophecies, Jake asked. Ancient writings that speak of a time when Earth would face its greatest threat, the man explained, and of those who would rise to defend it. Humans with celestial blood, bridges between our peoples. Zara squeezed Jake's hand reassuringly. What my grandfather is trying to say is that you're not just special, Jake. You're necessary. Earth's survival may depend on people like you. No pressure, Jake muttered. The council leader smiled. There's something you should see, the air. In the center of the chamber shimmered, and suddenly they were looking at a three-dimensional map of the galaxy. Red dots marked hundreds of star systems, and Jake watched in horror as more and more dots appeared. Each red mark is a world consumed by the Devourers, the leader explained. They're a force of pure destruction, feeding on entire planets until nothing remains but empty space. And they're heading for Earth, Jake said, understanding immediately. They'll arrive within 10 years, Eleanor confirmed. Traditional weapons won't stop them. Only combined human ingenuity and celestial power has any chance of success. Looked around at the assembled Celestials, then at Zara's beautiful, worried face. What exactly are you asking me to do? Accept your heritage fully, the leader said. Help us find and awaken others like you. Train with us, learn to use abilities you haven't even discovered yet. And when the time comes, stand with us to defend your world. And if I say no, you go back to your old life, Zara said quietly. Your abilities will fade over time. You'll be safe, normal, forgotten. Jake thought about his tiny apartment, his boring job, the endless cycle of rejection letters and small disappointments. Then he thought about flying through the night sky with Zara, about the incredible connection they shared, about the possibility of being part of something that truly mattered. There's just one problem, he said. What's that? Eleanor asked. I'm terrified I'm not good enough. A week ago, I couldn't even get hired at a fast food restaurant. Now you're telling me I'm supposed to help save the world? Zara stepped in front of him, taking both his hands in hers. Jake, do you remember what you told me the night we met? You felt like you'd been living in black and white your whole life? He nodded. That's because you were only living half a life, the human half. When you embrace your celestial side fully, you'll become more than you ever imagined possible. And we'll be together. Always, she said, and Jake felt the truth of it in their bond. Soul-bonded pairs are never separated. We'll train together, fight together, live together. Whatever comes, we face it as one. Jake looked around the chamber one more time. At Eleanor, who had given him this impossible gift. At the council members, who were trusting him with their desperate hope. At Zara, who had become the center of his universe in just a few short days, the choice wasn't really a choice at all. "Okay," he said, "I'm in." The relief in the room was palpable. Eleanor clapped her hands together delightedly. "I knew you'd make the right decision. So what happens now?" Jake asked. "Now," the council leader said, "your real education begins. You'll learn to harness abilities you never dreamed of. You'll discover the true history of your world and your place in the cosmic order. And you'll help us prepare for the greatest battle in Earth's history." "But first," Zara said with a smile that made Jake's heart skip, "we have a soul-bonding ceremony to complete. Are you ready to be linked with me forever?" Jake looked into her extraordinary eyes and saw his future there. Not the small, uncertain future he'd been worried about a week ago, but something vast and meaningful and full of love. "I've been ready since the moment I met you," he said. As the ceremony began, Jake felt the last of his old life falling away. He was no longer just a confused college graduate looking for his place in the world. He was a guardian, a protector, a bridge between two civilizations. And most importantly, he was exactly where he belonged. Eleanor watched the ceremony with tears of joy in her ancient eyes. Her plan had worked perfectly. Not only had she awakened a powerful new ally, but she'd also given her beloved granddaughter the partner she'd been searching for across the stars. The cookie had been just the beginning. The real magic was what Jake and Zara created together as their bond completed. Jake felt Zara's love flowing through him, stronger than any power he'd yet discovered. Together, they would face whatever came next. The universe had just become a much more interesting place.